Fire and movement tactics became the lifeline of frontline infantry and the one method that consistently broke deadlocks in World War II. The opening minute matters because fire and movement isn't just another battlefield term tossed around in documentaries. This was the heartbeat of small unit survival. When a squad met enemy fire in World War II, everything stopped except two things: suppressing fire and movement under pressure. Soldiers knew that staying still under accurate fire meant death, and rushing forward blindly meant the same. Fire and movement was the only controlled way to survive the initial shock, regain initiative, and push through a defended position. What makes this tactic essential to understand is that it wasn't theory. It was the day-to-day grind of men who learned quickly that coordination mattered more than bravery. Every advance, every assault, every attempt to reach an objective depended on this disciplined exchange between shooters and movers. Once you understand fire and movement, you understand how ordinary squads functioned in real combat conditions. Not the romanticized version, but the raw mechanical method that carried armies across continents. Fire and movement begins the moment fire halts a squad and demands immediate action. A World War II squad on the move was rarely alone in the grand scheme of a battalion or regiment, but at the moment of contact they had to operate as if no one else was coming. When enemy fire stopped their advance, doctrine stressed one truth above all. Someone must shoot and someone must move, and it must happen quickly. Soldiers dropped into cover using practice motions, rolling away from the spot where the enemy had seen them fall. Scouts signalled the presence of the enemy using tracers or shouted warnings, and the squad leader had just seconds to judge whether the enemy could be taken by his squad alone. The firefight phase was built around gaining fire superiority through controlled, deliberate shooting. Fire superiority didn't necessarily mean seeing individual targets. World War II field manuals emphasized that riflemen had to engage enemy positions whether or not the enemy was clearly visible. Suppressive fire kept heads down and broke the enemy's ability to aim effectively. Soldiers were trained to distribute fire across likely positions, not waste ammunition chasing fleeting shapes. Soldiers would lay down suppressive fire on enemy positions, working together to overwhelm and silence the opposition, even when the enemy remained unseen. Targets were called out clearly: direction, distance, description. With no radios, hand signals and arm gestures carried almost as much importance as spoken commands. This was really the language of movement in the chaos of battle. Once fire superiority was achieved, movement teams advanced using bounds controlled by terrain and squad structure. The squad usually split into two primary elements: a base of fire element and a maneuver element. At its simplest, this could also be done by pairs, or by the bar team supporting riflemen, or by multiple small teams adjusting based on casualties or terrain. The guiding principle stayed the same. One group fired, the other moved. A team advanced to the next piece of cover, signalled their new position, and the process repeated. Every bound had to be short, controlled and purposeful. Soldiers who moved too far risked outrunning their cover. Soldiers who hesitated risked losing momentum. Fire and movement worked because everyone trusted the other to do their part under pressure. Fire and movement demanded discipline because the battlefield punished hesitation and poor coordination. This phase was one of the most dangerous moments of any attack. Fire came from ahead and from friendly rifles firing over the movers' heads. The manuals of the time noted bluntly that a lack of training turned fire and movement into chaos. WWII units dealt constantly with replacements who had barely fired their rifles in training, much less coordinated movement under fire. You know, veterans often had to teach newcomers the rhythm of bounding in real combat, sometimes right in the middle of firefights. But once a squad really mastered the method, it became second nature, a controlled advance that allowed them to close the distance, where grenades, close-range fire, and those final assault tactics could, well, decide the fight. The assault phase, well, it began when the squad reached the last concealed position, just short of the objective. From there, the true assault actually started. If the base of fire element could keep the enemy pinned, the maneuver element shifted into the last stage, closing with the enemy. Fire had to shift at exactly the right moment to avoid, hitting friendly troops. Sometimes coloured smoke, flares, or vertical traces would signal the shift. Once they moved, riflemen often used assault fire, advancing while firing, using the M1's semi-automatic speed to keep the enemy suppressed. The goal was to shock the defenders, break their will, and seize the ground. Bayonet charges existed, but they were rare in the European theatre. Most soldiers preferred bullets and grenades over cold steel. After the assault, the squad reorganized immediately to prepare for counterattacks. Soldiers redistributed ammunition, cared for wounded, repositioned weapons, and secured prisoners. They dug in or shifted forward depending on the next objective. World War II veterans consistently recalled that the Germans in particular counterattacked rapidly and often. Holding newly captured ground meant preparing for another fight almost instantly. Fire and movement remains, one of the foundational lessons of battlefield survival and small unit success. It proved that coordination can overcome static defences, that discipline really does beat panic, and that survival comes from teamwork rather than individual action. Throughout the Second World War, successful fire and movement tactics demonstrated time and again the importance of adaptability and cooperation under fire. Understanding how these squads moved and fought gives, honestly, anyone studying the Second World War a clearer picture of what real combat looked like beyond the headlines and hero stories. If you want more in-depth World War II tactics broken down clearly and accurately, do consider subscribing to WARFRONT Survival and share this video with other history enthusiasts who appreciate the real methods soldiers relied on to stay alive.